Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Poet Speaks podcast. Our next guest is a performing spoken word poet, event curator, and blogger from Nairobi, Kenya. Her poetry revolves around the themes of love, femininity, Africa, sex, and the inevitability of heartbreak. All right, there we go. She has been a featured poet at poetry events across East Africa and has curated her own events in various parts of Kenya. She has written and performed for organizations such as Multichoice Africa, Unicef, UN, and in 2021 was interviewed on CNN. Please welcome to the podcast, Mumbi Macharia. Mumbi, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So please tell me, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes, Mumbi Macharia. Yeah, you did it.
Okay.
You did it perfectly.
Okay. I'm hoping I didn't mess anything up there. So tell me, where are you currently at in the world right now? Where's your location? Where are we talking to you out of?
So I'm currently in Nairobi, Kenya. This is where I was born, raised. I've spent most of my life here. I've spent some time at some coastal towns in Kenya, but for the most part, Nairobi is where I am.
All right, so born, bred, and raised in everything. That is very, very cool. You are our first ever Kenyan guest. So we have gone globally, but you are the first out of Kenya. So congratulations. No, I'm just kidding.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, tell us a little bit about growing up in Kenya. Obviously, that must have been the place where you found out that poetry was something that you wanted to do. Tell us a little bit about, I think I am very curious, what is the spoken word poetry scene like in Kenya? Do you have a big population of people that do spoken word poetry in Kenya?
So I started spoken word poetry when I was in high school. Actually, I started by writing like compositions for my English class. I would love writing compositions, even when like no one asked me to write compositions. And then one day in school, we would have like inter-school poetry competitions. So one of my friends was supposed to compete in the original composition category, but she couldn't make it because she had an exam. So my English teacher signed me up. And she was like, "You usually write anyway, so like I'm sure this is something you should be able to do." And I was like, "But I've never written a poem in my life." But I remember, so I went home that day because the competition was like the following day. I think I wrote a poem about like a boy in my class or something. And then the following day we went to the competition, and I was actually disqualified from the competition because you had to like type out your poem and submit it to the judges before like you perform. And so they looked at the structure of my poem and they're like, "I don't know what this is, but this is not poetry. It's not like the traditional way that a poem should look," because it just looked like a story that I was writing. And at the time, I didn't know that, what I was writing was spoken word poetry, because I would just be on YouTube and I would like watch videos of poets. I think at the time I used to watch like button poetry and like very like American spoken word poetry, because in Kenya I didn't know anyone who was doing anything like that. But then even after that competition, I wrote like two more poems. I would perform like at assembly in school. And then immediately after high school, just one day I was on Facebook, and on Facebook you could search for like events that are happening in the city. So I would search for events in Nairobi, and then I just typed like poetry events, and I found an open mic poetry event that was happening at a movie theater. They used to do it every first Tuesday of the month. So I told my mom about it, and my mom took me to this event, and I was so shocked because like the room was just filled with people who were doing the same thing that I was doing, even though I didn't know that what I was doing was spoken word. But I just remember like sitting there listening to these people performing, and I'm like, but this is what I'm doing. And that was the first time I performed, I think, to an audience or in a space where I was aware that what I'm doing is spoken word poetry. And then from there, I would just go back to the events every first Tuesday of the month. I found other poetry events. And just like that, these events would eventually start calling me like, hey, you didn't show up. We want you to be our featured poet for the month. And so that happened. Eventually, I think I did Slam Africa, which was a poetry slam competition that happened in Nairobi. I came in second place. After that, getting people even from like Uganda, Tanzania, being like, can you come perform at our poetry events? Because with the internet, I didn't know that my poetry was they're going beyond borders. I didn't know people in Uganda had heard of me because I was just performing. I would have someone record me, post it on my YouTube or Facebook or whatever, and I don't know, the rest is history.
Yeah, man. Woo, that is quite a story. I mean, all that coming from, what was it? You said your friend didn't go and then you just ended up going, taking her place. I mean, look at all, I mean, that is mind blowing. Look at all the success that you've now had. I mean, that's really amazing. So that's kind of how you kicked off your poetry career. So let's go into kind of your poems. I'm a huge fan. I love how you write. I love what you write about. Being a Nigerian myself, a lot of oral tradition, Nigerian oral tradition is so deep inside what I write personally as well. So for you, your Kenyan heritage and identity in your work explores that quite a bit from what I've seen. For you, how has your cultural identity affected your poetry writing?
So for one, I think even language, because I write some of my poems in Swahili. And Swahili, I think, is just a very like poetic language. It's such a language of love. So I think one, language, and then two, one thing I realized about poetry is that it's also just, I'm passionate about the documentation of culture and history and context, because I think one thing that's really sad about like African cultures is the fact that we don't have enough of our history that is passed down generations, because we used to document culture by like songs and poems. It was mainly oral more so than it was written. And so over time, there was just a break in the passing down of culture and history. So I think it's just my way of just an ode to those who came before me, the great poets, songwriters, yeah, all just the great artists, yeah, who came before me.
You talked a little bit about so you write your poetry in different languages, Swahili being one of them, and I agree with you with that. I do think it's a very romantic language. It's definitely like just in its tonality, it's there's texture to the language that you can't really put your finger on, but it's just there's a texture to it. For you, when you write in different languages, let's say Swahili versus writing in English, what for you kind of is permeating through your brain as you're writing in Swahili, writing poetry versus writing in English? I know poets that write in different languages. I know a lot of people that write in different languages, but they all have their kind of reasoning for doing it, and they all have their kind of method of madness for doing it. What does that process look like for you writing in Swahili versus, again, like English or another language?
I think some poems, just even when I sit down to write them, some poems just naturally come to me in Swahili, because um, when you speak different languages, there's some things that you only know how to say in one language, especially African languages, when you translate it into English, it doesn't sound the same. It loses something in translation. If it's like, say, proverbs, in Kiswahili we call them like methalis, or like teachings. They're just some proverbs in African languages that when you translate them into English, it loses something in translation. So I think for me it's just preserving the integrity of the weight of whatever it is that I want to say, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can agree with that. I think there's so much value in oral tradition and language that I think a lot of, especially our African traditions and language and oral tradition, that it does get lost in translation when you try to translate that into colonized English, if you will. So I completely agree with that. No, and I love that. I love that a lot. So I want to let's move on a little bit. In 2020, you were interviewed on CNN One World, and you discussed a poem you wrote called "Dear World Leaders." That poem has now become famous and synonymous with change. So, what has been the effect you believe that poem has had, and what made you write it? And were you shocked at the worldwide attention and fame now that you had gone from writing that poem?
So that poem came about. I was contacted by someone who worked at an organization called PMNCH, which is the Partnership for Maternal and Newborn Health, and they do work about just ensuring like equality in healthcare for women, children, and adolescents. And so they said, we've heard your poetry. I think maybe they heard one of my poems like on YouTube or something, and they contacted me and they said, would you be interested in writing a poem for us for a UN seminar that was happening in a few weeks? And so at first I was so shocked. I was like, me? Because it was so, just being a poet from Kenya, you don't assume that, someone in an office somewhere in, I don't know, New York or wherever would take the time to listen to your work and find your email and contact you and say that you are the person we want to entrust with this message, to write a poem to spread this message. So that was just it was very shocking for me, but also just very, I don't know, it was an interesting experience. So I wrote the poem Dear World Leaders, because I wanted to write it as an open letter to world leaders, because the event that they were having was a political forum. So I decided to write an open letter to world leaders, to just say that as much as we give women the platform and amplify women's voices, there's still so many women whose voices aren't being heard. And that's why in the poem I said that when you look at me, I look at me as one of those girls. Look at me as one of those girls who is getting pregnant at 12 years old. Look at me as one of those girls who can't afford pads. Look at me as one of those girls who is being sold off as a wife. Um, just to sometimes you have to make people uncomfortable for them to actually listen, because it's not enough to just say that, yeah, there are people who need help, full stop. You need to say that you need to look at me as one of those people. So that was the poem. And then they contacted me again and they said, well, we've listened to your poem. Would you be open to doing an interview on CNN, because they want to ask you questions about this poem? And I was just like, again, me? Because as a poet from Kenya, you don't assume that you would ever, see yourself on CNN. But yeah, that happened. And yeah, I'm actually writing another poem for them this year. They're having another event next week, should be on the 13th of July. So yeah, I will have another poem for them this year. So yeah, I'm very grateful, very honored. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like one of those things, like you said, making people uncomfortable to bring about that change. For you, why do you think that message is so important to let people know, especially through your work as a spoken word poet? Why do you think it's so important to use your words to bring people to that uncomfortable place to make that change?
I think I always think that artists are the gatekeepers of truth. And as artists, we have the opportunity where we already have an audience that wants to listen to something. People want to be entertained, people want to be taken out of their normal day-to-day activities. So people come to you for content. And so I think just as an artist, we have that responsibility to also be a voice for the voiceless, and you know, to also just use our voice for positive change, because if we don't, then who will?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Love that. Very beautiful statement. For you, I'm curious then too, being on a platform like CNN, you described it as interesting. You used the word specifically interesting. Was it something did you feel almost like you were thrust into the spotlight and that was just a whirlwind of just press and just all these things? Or did you feel like it was just that was just super cool, super exciting? What was the feeling like being on such a national platform like CNN and talking about that poem?
So I think I used the word interesting because I was thinking about the imposter syndrome that I was sort of feeling at the time. Because even when I said like me, it's almost like you know, sometimes when like good things happen to you or recognition happens to you, you're always like, do I really deserve this? Like, you know, are there other people who are more worthy of this? So I think that's why I said it was interesting, because on one hand, there's that crippling imposter syndrome, but on the other hand, it's like, I know that I'm good at what I do. I know that this poem was fire. I don't doubt myself or my artistry one bit. So just trying to make that voice louder than the imposter syndrome, trying to tell you that you don't deserve to be here, there are other people who deserve to be here. Yeah, but at the end of the day, the voice that won is just the voice that told me that you are good at what you do, you are here for a reason. So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. I love that line. It seems imposter syndrome, no matter how big you get, no matter how successful, that still does follow so many of us. So you know what? You've been the recipient, of numerous accolades. So you've written commissioned poems for the World Bank, the United Nations. For you, having those kind of honors and titles, what does that really mean for you when processing that, looking at, like, you're so young but you've had so much success? What does kind of processing those accolades, what does that mean to you?
I think it's funny because there when something like that happens to you, the well, at least for me, the immediate like feeling afterwards is, okay, now what? You know, like, what if I never reach this again? What if that was just a one-time thing? So that's something I've like repeatedly have to deal with, and just to just remind myself that it's not a fluke that these things happen to you. um but also I think it's because even from the story that I've just told of how I started poetry, if you were to tell me then in high school that like you are one day going to write commissioned poems and be interviewed on international TV, me in high school, I'd have looked at you like, what? So for me, I think it just means that it's a reassurance that, yes, I am good at what I do, and I should never doubt my artistry. But also, even just for other poets coming up, and to the younger version of me, it just shows that it's possible. Like, these things are possible. I get, so many poets even in Kenya who send me messages, and they're like, how do I get to where you are? And so many times I tell people there's no formula, because for me there was no formula. I just went to every event I could go to, uploaded as many videos as I could. There was just no formula for me, and at the time it seemed like, such heights couldn't be reached by, a poet. So for me, it just shows that it's possible. And if this is possible, who knows what else is possible? I'm sure there's so many bigger things that are way more possible. I mean, Kenyan poets could win Grammys, could do such amazing things. So it just shows me that, like, girl, you don't even know what is possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. Truly, truly, you do not know what is possible until you just really put your foot out there, dipping in that water. Absolutely, absolutely. So a little bit about you, even some more. So you recently released your debut EP, extended play. It's called Libation. It consists of 5 poems that you dedicated to your Kenyan heritage and is available on all streaming platforms and YouTube. Tell us a little bit about that EP. I'm always so intrigued. This is a perfect example of just a spoken word poet, spreading their wings, putting their poetry into even more places, like an EP, like an album, whatever may have you. Tell us why you made that and why the title Libation.
So I decided to put out an EP just to broaden my audience. Just, yeah, you miss all the shots that you don't take. So I was like, I might as well just, put my poetry on streaming platforms. So yeah, for me, I mean, we're just entering like an age where poets are now starting to put their work on streaming platforms, because some years ago there was something you couldn't even fathom. So for me, it was just kind of like challenging myself to see, okay, this is how you do it. These are the steps to take. Um, and then the title was called Libation because, so libation is like an offering to ancestors. And so for me, this being my first project putting out, usually like in African culture, like before you start eating, you first give some food as libation or some drinks as libation to ancestors. So it was the same thing before I start now looking to put out more EPs or albums. This being the first project or the first EP, it only made sense to give it as libation. Before now continuing and starting to work on new projects. Yeah, that was kind of the reasoning behind the title.
Absolutely. I'm so curious about the process. Did you self-produce this all yourself, or did you go through like a record label, all that stuff, or was this completely 100% self-produced?
No, this was 100% self-produced. I have a neighbor who has like a home studio.
Okay.
So we would these are poems, first of all, that I wrote. I've been writing since 2017, I think. So they're
Wow.
poems that I've had. Yeah, so just got into the studio, recorded them. We did the mixing and mastering together, and then yeah, it was 100% a homemade project. Yeah.
Homemade, homegrown. How was so I'm assuming you did the marketing by yourself for the EP too. How was that kind of marketing your EP as a poet? How'd that process go?
So I think one thing that I realized, and that I think I say to people is being an artist, one, no one prepares you for the fact that you also have to become a marketer, you have to become a promoter. Um, just being like, even like a small business owner, you have to be a content creator, which is something people don't tell you from the onset. And sometimes the marketing and promoting aspect can put some people off, because it's like, I just want to make my art and that's it, and perform. For some people, it can be very like, it can give you a lot of anxiety, like having to go on TV stations, radio stations, tell people, please listen to my work. It can get like very draining, especially for someone who's not done it before, or who doesn't have a team um, to show them the ropes. So for me, I did have so much anxiety with it. I had a friend who put me in touch with someone who worked in PR, and they said, okay, so this week we're gonna get you on like 5 TV stations. We're gonna get a radio station interview. And for me, I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is too much. This is too much. I just want to do my poetry, perform, and go home. That's it. Um, so it was a new experience. It was a new experience. Let me just say that. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the reach and the coverage that it got. Um, but yeah, I think just as an artist who stumbled upon poetry, every day is a learning experience. Everything I do, every new opportunity, it's always a learning experience. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like you said, yeah, I completely agree. I think there's an overwhelming nature of just having to market yourself as an artist that no one has that conversation with you until you just literally just fall headfirst into it. And it completely can be overwhelming at a lot of different times. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, an example I like to use is Summer Walker, because I think Summer Walker, she said so many times that she does not like the marketing and promotional aspects. So even when she like puts up a post like promoting her work, people always like, she doesn't seem like she wants to do this. And it's like, yeah, this girl, she just wants to make her music, perform alone in her room, and and I completely understand where she's coming from, because not every artist has that innate um it has that innate ability to do the marketing and promotion. Yeah.
Absolutely. You know what? That actually reminds me. I because I know there was someone had told me at one point she's an artist, she does interior design, and she was just like literally as an artist, about only 10% of what we do is the actual artwork. The other 90% literally is that business aspect of literally, crossing the T's, dotting the I's, the little details that no one likes to do. That's literally what business is made out of. And it does become this kind of thing where it's like you only get about 10% of what you get to do, what you love to do, and it's only about 10%. It's such a small aspect. The rest of what you do has to be so infiltrated by the capitalism of it all and the business of it all. And it really is such a, yeah, man, it really is such an unfortunate thing. But you know what? The making that 10%, really making that the best you can, is really what really counts anyway, and all that good stuff. So yeah, no, I completely vibe on that. So for you, here's another one for you. I'm so curious for you, who's your poetry inspiration for your spoken word poetry? Who really inspires you when you write?
I think so. When I first like started writing poetry, I was listening to maybe not spoken word poets, but a lot of like hip hop, rap. Um, I remember the first, and that was around the time when I was really getting into music, like listening to albums, understanding what an album is, what a body of work is. So I used to listen to a lot of Isaiah Rashad. Um, and his music was very, he was very vulnerable in his music. The first album I had of his was Sylvia Demo, and then Pieces of a Kid. It was very vulnerable, like talking about like anxiety, depression, suicide, stuff like that. I think that was the first time I actually heard someone talk so openly and in depth about such topics in music, and that really like moved me. Talking about breakups, falling out with friends. So for me, I was like, this is definitely something that I want to incorporate into my poetry, because someone told me you only start writing poetry when you start telling the truth. So I think when you're vulnerable and you're open and you're truthful, that people will relate to your work, and even your writing is more authentic. And I think people can always tell when you're being authentic.
I love that line. You become a poet when you start. You say you become a poet when you start telling the truth. I love that line. I love that line. You become a poet when you actually start telling the truth. No, that's some real stuff right there. Absolutely. I love that. So Isaiah Rashad, that's very, I think people would be shocked that you would be that you'd be influenced by an American rapper like Isaiah Rashad. So is he popular? I'm curious. Is he what that's very interesting. I'm curious. In Kenya, do you all listen to a lot of USA hip hop as opposed to maybe London scene, but the USA is really what is hits a lot in Kenya in terms of hip hop?
Yeah, I think recently UK hip hop has started becoming big in Kenya, but I think for the most part, US hip hop is very big. US hip hop, R&B. Um, Also, a lot of West African music is really huge. I actually, if you were to ask me the biggest genre played in Kenya, I would say it would be maybe Afrobeat. But we also, a few years ago, we started. There was a hashtag called Play KE, where Kenyan artists were calling for like more radio stations and events to start playing Kenyan music. So there's also just a lot of Kenyan music being played right now, and a lot of Kenyan artists who are getting the recognition that they deserve.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's really cool. Really cool. So as we're wrapping up, there's been such a great interview. Um, I have two final questions for you. So first one, when did you know you were a poet?
When did I know that I was a poet? Hmm. I don't know. I don't want to say it's when like I wrote that first poem. I think it was when I started going for these open mic events, and like after I would perform, I would be like, oh my gosh, this was so cringe, let me just go sit down. I don't think like people got what I was trying to say. And like I remember the first time I performed a poem at an open mic poetry event, and like I think I got standing ovation from like half the audience, and I was like, what? So for me, I think that's when I knew that I was a poet, because these are the poets, these are the writers, people who live in this space who are telling me, yeah, you're onto something. I think that's when I considered myself a poet.
Nice. Absolutely. Okay, and Mumbi, last question for you. Why do you need to get your words out?
Hmm. I think so. One, I'm an only child, so just growing up, writing was always just a way for me to express myself, whether it was like writing in my diary or just fiction. Writing has always been just a way for me to express myself. Um, so I think that's what it is. I'm able to express myself the best through the poetry I write. Actually, if anyone wants to get to know me as a person, just like listen to my poetry. Because if you ask me questions, I might freeze and glitch. But if you listen to my poetry, I think that's my like truest, that's just me being like very vulnerable. So I think that's why it's important. That was why it was important to me. Then at some point when you realize that your words are actually impacting people, helping people, inspiring people, that also becomes a reason why I need to get my words out.
Absolutely, absolutely. Love that, love that, love that. All right. Well, thank you so much. We loved having you on the show today. Before we wrap up and end this wonderful, beautiful, amazing interview, tell us, what is 2022 looking like for you, for your writing and beyond, and where can folks come and find all of your amazing work and all of your events coming up, social media, all that good stuff?
Okay, so social media, you can find me at Mumbi Poetry on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, on Facebook, Mumbi Spoken Word. Um, I host open mic events in Nairobi and sometimes in Kilifi, which is at the coast of Kenya. What is 2022 looking like? I'll take this as an opportunity to manifest the things that I want to happen. I would definitely want to be writing more commissioned work for organizations or just causes that I feel like I need to lend my voice to, more events, definitely collaborations. I would really love to collaborate with artists, even in Kenya, outside Kenya. I think African artistry is so powerful, and when we come together, artists from east, west, south, north, everywhere, I think African art would be a force to be reckoned with if we collaborated more and supported each other. So definitely manifesting collaborations. If there's any African artists, musicians watching, listening, hit me up. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. We're looking forward to hearing more about your work, that and so much more. Everyone, go check out Mumbi's links. It'll be in the YouTube page of the Poet Speaks podcast. All her links will be in the description box. All right. So, Mumbi, thank you so much for being a guest on the Poet Speaks podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, go check out all of Mumbi's works, YouTube description box of our page. All right, and this is the Poet Speaks podcast, and we will talk to you soon. All right, bye-bye, everyone. All right, we finished. Yo, good job.
Thank you. That was nice.